You're listening to 3rd Wave Trade Talks, a podcast that explores the dynamic world of global trade and compliance. I'm Grant Sernick, Head of Sales and Marketing at 3rd Wave, where we empower businesses to master the complexities of international trade. Join me as I sit down with industry experts, innovators, and thought leaders to explore the trends, challenges, and insights that shape the future of global trade. All right, so here we are with my good friend Noah Sange from ECU Worldwide. Noah, welcome to the show.
Grant, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Firstly, you have to correct the record for posterity. Is it ECU or EQ or what is the official pronunciation, or is it ECU? What is the official pronunciation?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been here over a year. I should know that. I think, it's kind of like, will we respond to any of those three?
Just don't call me late for dinner.
Somebody was telling me the story. The story of our name was that when the euro was coming out, when the euro was like being talked about and being voted on by the European Union, one of the potential candidates for the name of the currency was the ECU or the ECU or the EQ, whatever you want to call it. So apparently this company was like, they chose that name because they thought it would be great to grab that name. It's like naming your company Dollar or something like that.
Yeah. Right. And then
that wasn't the name. So whoops. So it's not an acronym. It's not ECU, but yeah, it's ECU or EQ.
EQ. Okay. So let's start. I guess, well, maybe it might be interesting. We met at TPM last year.
Yeah.
Where I think it was on the last day, I needed to charge my phone. And so I was sitting at a charging station by myself, and you happened to wander up, and we ended up chatting for a little while. And that's how we ended up meeting. It just so happens, just as an aside, with TPM, which is happening in March, 3rd Wave will actually be on stage, on the main stage with a couple of our customers talking about things. So that's kind of exciting. So I'm
is exciting. Congrats. Yeah. I look forward to seeing that. I'll be there as well.
Yeah. So I expect to see you there again. You were telling me about ECU and sort of what you guys do. And it's not, I don't think, accurate to call you guys just a forwarder. Although you do that too.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what ECU does?
Yeah, of course. So we are the largest LCL provider in the world, less than container load. And I'll just stipulate that LCL is a weird business. The unit economics of ocean freight usually are going to incentivize you to try and move a full container. Not a less than container, a full container. So, when a company tries to ship ocean freight, they try and fill a container, and sometimes they don't have enough. Maybe the manufacturing cycle turned out something less than what they thought, and so they have much less than a container, maybe not even half a container. And then maybe they have too much. Maybe the manufacturing actually delivered 20% more, and so what are you going to do with that? A lot of times you still have to buy that. And you still want to get that over, but you don't want to book another container. So because of what we call underflow or overflow, this occurrence, we exist, right? That's why LCL exists. Now, most of the big forwarders, DHL, Kuehne + Nagel, C.H. Robinson, they don't have an LCL business. They tend to co-load, and they co-load with us or some other providers. We're the largest, so we have a really big network, and what that means is we have boots on the ground everywhere. We don't operate with a lot of agents. We have our own warehouses. We're actually stuffing containers or devanning containers. So it's a great backbone for a network, but the bulk of our business, like our main customers, are other forwarders who don't want to build their own mixed box. They just want to resell our services to their customers who need LCL. A lot of times they'll move on their bill of lading, and we're just happy to sell them the space per cubic meter. But that's the core of our business. Mm-hmm. But we've also sort of grown to do some business direct, and my business is primarily focused on 3PLs. So this is what I call warehouses that are focused on fulfillment, who are not freight forwarders. And we're building consolidations for them, many of whom are, have customers that are sourcing from Asia. And so, we're co-loading and bringing in shipments for that.
So let's say you mentioned Kuehne Nagel, just as an example. So if I'm a shipper and I have, a couple pallets to move or something like that, and I go to Kuehne Nagel and I say, hey, I got to move these pallets from, Shanghai to Long Beach or whatever that is. Kuehne Nagel will say, not a problem. I've got, this is how much it is, whatever it is. But am I right in understanding that Kuehne Nagel will give me a bill of lading? They'll give me a house bill of lading saying they're moving it.
Yep.
But it's actually not Kuehne Nagel moving it. It would be ECU.
Often it will be ECU. Yeah, it could be one of our competitors, co-loading competitors as well. Depends on the lane. Like basically someone as big as Kuehne, that they will move with many different providers. But we typically, there'll be certain lanes that they'll designate to us, and they'll go in and they'll see when our next sailing is from Shanghai and our next arrival to Long Beach, and they'll pick the right sailing, and they'll be put on what's called a neutral box. So they'll literally these two pallets would be beside their competitors, DHL and CH Robinson, but it's a neutral box. We don't share the information about who's in there, and so we respect the neutrality of the situation, but we give them a really good per cubic meter rate to move it that then they in turn essentially resell to their customer.
So I find I'm actually quite knowledgeable about the FCL world and moving full containers, because most of our customers actually do that. The LCL world, I know less of. So let's say a company has a couple pallets to move, so they go to Kuehne Nagel, and Kuehne Nagel uses ECU to actually do the move. So you're gonna have you can have two or more customers in a neutral container.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So so it's going to get stuffed in Shanghai in this example, and now that container is going to get on a vessel. It's going to move. I expect, is there there's still a master bill of lading? Is there a master bill of lading, and who is that contract between?
Yeah, that would be between ECU and the steamship line.
The steamship line. So if I were moving an LCL shipment and I want to track the the status of the container, I have a service to, let's say a Vision or one of a Project 44, somebody who has Ocean 350 messages. I'm using the master bill of lading number, similar to what I would do otherwise with a FCL, I guess.
Yep.
But I'm tracking the master bill to see the status of that bill.
Yep.
And then when it comes to clearing customs, each party who has a part of that container needs to clear their goods independently.
They do. And this is a really important distinction of why LCL can be a little slower than, and there's some risk in LCL, right? Because your shipment could be put beside a container that has counterfeit goods, or someone that just doesn't have good paperwork or didn't file their ISF or something like that. So there are challenges like that with our business. We're very aggressive about getting the documents that we need, and for the most part, our forwarders are good about that too. But there is a certain element of risk when you're in a container with other people, because we're dependent on everybody's clearance before that gets released. And LCL containers typically have more physical inspections than full containers. They just do. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol is highly interested in what's in an LCL container because there's so many different entries in a single container.
So is it safe to say that, if, let's say, one of the pallets, not yours, somebody else's pallet in a container, has an FDA say like is food product or something like that,
Yep.
and they get called for an inspection, that whole container is being held up.
It does. It absolutely does. And it's a great call out. So what we tend to do is I mean, first of all, we're not just moving one container from Shanghai. Typically, when there's a departure, we may have 10 to 15 possessions on that boat. And in that case, we would have an FDA container, we'd have a hazmat container, we'd have a container that's just furniture like items, like we typically tend to put certain categories that customs look at together, and that will improve the likelihood decrease the likelihood.
Minimize the chances that
You got it. But if you're talking about like a really small origin or destination, we have a strong business in the Caribbean, but Kingston, Jamaica is one container a week. It is what it is, and everything's mixed in that container. So
right.
When you get into these smaller origins or destinations, you are going to see more delays because of that, because all the consignees are mixed in that one container.
Right. So, okay, well, let's so just to finish up on ECU then. So your primary business is sort of the LCL world. Is that the extent of what it is that you guys do, or do you have other business as well?
We have some other businesses. So it's an interesting story. We were founded in 1984 in Belgium. So it's a Belgian company, and we always had a very strong agent in India, in the port of Mumbai, Nava Shiva, and this was a company that grew. The port handler there grew, and they became known as All Cargo Logistics. Now, All Cargo was very successful. They've diversified into real estate and fulfillment and domestic trucking within India. They actually acquired a company called Gati, but they ended up buying ECU in 2014. So All Cargo is now our parent company, and they're a diverse company. They do a lot, like I said, they do a lot of different things. So that's interesting, including even like e-commerce incubation. They're interested in acting as a VC for companies that are in growth mode that maybe can propel more shipments into our network. So that's primarily our core business. It is still ocean freight, but in India it's domestic trucking. In the US, we have a truck brokerage that's called EQ Trucking. So that's a subsidiary of EQ, but they, sometimes they just do domestic only truck moves that have nothing to do with international.
Right.
And that's primarily our business. But in India, it's more than just ocean freight. It's also fulfillment. We happen to be the landlord for a lot of large internet companies in India. We own some warehousing that's in some critical places there, and we operate container freight stations in India as well.
Right. Okay. And so, what is your role then? And what's your role? Tell us what your role is.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the founder of All Cargo is highly interested in all things digital, and so one of the things that they've invested in heavily is our portal and our visibility and our website. Which just makes us more friendly for internet companies that are trading on the internet, and really makes us more friendly, in this evolving world. But we're especially attractive to anyone that's doing business online. So, my background is very much in e-commerce, more so on the fulfillment side. I was 17 years with DHL, worked for their supply chain division, worked for Geodis, which is a large French 3PL and freight forwarder. But it focused on e-commerce, high growth e-commerce companies. Those are the people that I did business with. So we're interested in playing in this ecosystem, and there's a lot of different ways you can do that. One of the ways that we're doing it, I think I mentioned earlier, is that we're partnering with warehouses to help them. That's kind of, in my mind, that's kind of a missing link. When the container comes in, a lot of times there's no heads up. There's not good notification that the container is going to be there, and there's this weird dance where they're trying to schedule the appointment, and maybe there's a hot pallet somewhere on that container that could have been tail loaded and gotten out quicker. That kind of coordination between the freight forwarder and the warehouse in the past, it's not there. So I'm interested in building that bridge. And so I work with these warehouses on partnering with them on their inbound flow and providing services to their customers, mostly ocean freight services. We actually do air freight as well, but mostly ocean freight, and just sort of helping them achieve their goals. And a lot of their customers tend to be sort of internet companies that have an Amazon channel, or companies that have a thriving website. Their inventories really fluctuate a lot, and they may have a lot of SKUs, and they're shipping out lots of eaches via parcel. So they really have to keep an eye on this inbound flow, because this got very much out of whack during the pandemic. We saw that. So there's an even bigger need to have a better relationship with your freight forwarder, and someone that really understands the transit times and the inbound flow and links it to the inventory that's in the warehouse. That's primarily what I'm focused on, is working with our partners in those areas.
So so if I'm an e-com company, Amazon Junior or something like that. So, the example of tail loading, you having a hot pallet and making sure that it's like in the back of a truck or something, or back of a container, back of a truck. Well, probably back of a truck is more likely, but so how do you do, what kinds of things do you work on?
Yeah, so a better example would be a company like Shipmonk. Right?
Okay.
So they are an e-commerce warehouse company. They have 11 warehouses in the U.S. They have 1,000 customers, many of whom are importing from Asia.
Okay.
And so they are essentially offering ocean freight services to their captive audience of 1,000 high growth internet companies, and we're streamlining the movements into those 11 warehouses from Asia. And we are effectively sort of helping to control that inbound flow. And if you ride on the Shipmonk box that comes out of Shanghai, that's a priority box, and they are getting a consolidation with their other tenants that are in that Shipmonk warehouse. And these are people that today, like Shipmonk, a few months ago, really didn't participate in ocean freight at all. So it's a new phenomenon for them. Before us, they were getting surprised by every different forwarder that just showed up at their door. And we're actually attempting to sort of corral more of their customers that happen to be tenants in a single warehouse, taking it back to origin or taking it back to our CFS in LA. So maybe you have customers that are importing from Vietnam and Cambodia and China and Japan, and everything comes together in LA, and we build a single truck to their warehouse in Southern California and Fontana, for example. So that's more of what I'm working with, is sort of warehouse-based fulfillment providers in the U.S. that want to add the ocean freight element to what they're doing.
So I think I understand that. So in the Shipmonk example, then they have 1,000 customers, and did you say that those customers, they will contract with Shipmonk for Shipmonk to move the goods from Shanghai to their warehouse or whatever it is?
Shipmonk says to their customers, we have a partnership with ECU.
Okay.
Right. So they're essentially acting as a sales agent, but they are publishing our sailing schedule from Shanghai, and they're saying this is the price per cubic meter for all their 1,000 customers if they want to participate in the weekly sailing. That's the Shipmonk box to their Fontana, California location, or to their Chicago location, or their Harrisburg, Pennsylvania location.
I see. Okay, so I mean that makes a lot of sense. So if there are other companies like Shipmonk, which I'm sure there are many.
Hundreds, if not thousands, yeah.
Right. So your job then is to develop sort of the relationships with those customers and figure out how to basically replicate the best practice of process amongst these thousands of companies or warehouses that are like Shipmonk.
Yeah. And a lot of times these companies are, in and of themselves, they're kind of small. Like they're maybe shipping once a month. Maybe they only have a few pallets, but when you look in aggregate, I mean, it's a lot of volume, and we can help them out, and a lot of times the big forwarders really aren't interested in these companies. They're below their radar. So they're not able to get very cost-effective rate prices. A lot of times they don't understand how to do customs brokerage, and we can introduce them to our brokerage division, which, ends up being a really nice value add. And it provides visibility. But the most important thing is that linkage with the 3PL warehouse to provide them a really good, almost a seamless experience. And often we'll integrate with the 3PL's portal so they can go log in and see their inventory. Oh, I'm running low. Maybe I need to order some new. They can do it from right there. And they can see the container tracking inbound and schedule the delivery for the container or for the pallets as they're coming in.
Right. So how do you find with these sort of shipmonk type companies? My feeling is that in the e-com world, the data that's available is really pretty good if you were to compare that to some of the other industries that exist, just because the nature of their business is such that everything's digitized. So,
yeah.
So
No, it's
available.
pretty good. I mean, a lot of them are using Shopify. A lot of them or NetSuite, they have pretty good, many of them have pretty good databases and SKU, master item masters and things like that. They are doing business on the internet. So it's all there. It's all digital. And we can do an integration and get all that information into our system. Or a lot of times they want to just use our APIs, and they can, they can get like the tracking information or the quoting information, the pricing information. They can pull it out of our system via an API webhook, which is a really nice way that they can integrate back into their portal. So, the data can flow either way.
Right. That's really quite interesting. So how did you end up getting into this business?
Oh gosh, the world of logistics. And remember, I've done a lot of different things. I've been a warehousing guy. I've been a parcel guy. Worked for DHL Express for many years. So not always an ocean freight guy, but it's funny. I was a Russian major in college, and I worked in Katya's Russian tea room in San Francisco. So I was waiting tables. I just graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was trying to figure it out. And I probably would have gone to Russia, but they had like an economic collapse in the late 90s. So I chose not to. Moved to California. And this guy walked in and he said, "Hey, you're educated and why are you waiting tables?" I spoke to him in Russian, but he realized I had an education. He's like, "Call this guy." And so that turned out to be a sales manager at a company that was later acquired by DHL. So that's how my career in logistics started. Kind of right place, right time. But I love it.
Or wrong place, wrong time, or something.
Exactly.
I find I always ask that question of people I talk to, because it's nobody. Well, it's the rare occasion. It's not a zero, but it's the rare occasion where you talk to someone where they say, yeah. When I was 6, I always wanted to be in
logistics,
freight and logistics and move stuff around. And so what you have is like a whole bunch of people that never expected to be where they are, and so the story and the journey for how they got to where they get to is really quite fascinating. And as I say that, and when I think back, I mean, most people in most industries, I guess it's the odd person that says, "I want to be a fireman," when they grow up and end up turning into a fireman. But it's this world really is kind of like a strange world, and I'm always amazed, like, just because we're in ocean freight, like how one becomes part of the merchant marine, like as a guy who grew up in Toronto, which is probably as far away from the ocean as you could possibly get. Like that was never on my radar as something. Like, of course, vessels are moving all over the place, and if you care to think that maybe there were people that worked on them, that somehow there's a path to getting to one if that were your thing.
Sure.
I just like, I thought like it's such a unusual job being in the merchant marine or working in, logistics and
logistics in
international.
general. Yeah. I mean, I think Amazon has made it a little bit more sexy. Like early on in the 90s and early 2000s, the companies I worked for had trouble recruiting good people because it was just, it was considered kind of a blue collar, kind of not upward mobility kind of career thing. But I think supply chain has become a really important part of the business world. And I think more and more Amazon has helped, right? They've realized like that's a company that used supply chain as a tool to accelerate their growth and really just dominate. And so you see now in other companies, it used to be the chief marketing officer that got the top job, or the CFO, who knew the numbers and knew how to talk to the investors. Now, a lot of times it's the operations or the chief supply chain officer that gets the top job, because that is what it's about. Like, mature business is about, figuring out how to have a really efficient supply chain,
Right.
And I think so that's an interesting phenomenon. And then the other thing, just when I think about this career, I've been in it for 26 years, and it's just, it's important. I mean, it's not curing cancer, but it is, we are the lifeblood of the global economy. I mean, at any given time, 30% of the entire globe's economy is on ships moving around. So we're like the circulatory system of that. And I think it's important that we understand it. And it's, it's moving pieces on a chessboard. It's strategy. And I don't know. I've found that it's never boring. Take that for what it will. It's also, sometimes I wish it was boring, because it's a little.
Then you get to relax a little bit every now and again. But
it's fun. No, I enjoy it. It's fun. Yeah.
it is. And I mean, I think Amazon made a big difference. I think COVID certainly created a major. It was a major event that people couldn't help but understand supply chains exist and that there's a problem. Again, because I work also in trade compliance. You want to talk about unsexy. When I first entered this world, if you want to talk unsexy business, trade compliance was like the ugly stepson of like the international logistics world.
Sure.
And ironically, Trump with the 301 tariffs basically put trade compliance professionals, from people that never got to talk to anybody in senior management, to the C-level table almost overnight, because a 25% tariff was totally unheard of.
Yeah.
Before this, and that was a huge deal. And then pile on the inability to get product, to get capacity on a vessel. My sister works for one of the major retailers in Canada, and one of the things, when nobody could get capacity on vessels, they were big enough to at least talk about chartering their own vessels to move containers to get them in, not really thinking about, but they still have to go through a port.
Right.
And
exactly.
Doesn't
help to have your own ship if you can't get into the port.
If you can't get into the port, it's like you could get probably to about a mile offshore faster than anybody else, and then you're in line. Yep. And that quickly, it turns out that doesn't, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you can move your goods faster.
Yep.
And so it's like a totally fascinating world. And I call myself lucky to be, in it, even though, again, it wasn't my life dream when I was 6 years old to be where I am today.
Yep.
But it really did open up, this new world to me, and the ability to meet really interesting people that I really like, and you included in sort of that set. And I find that these quote unquote blue collar guys, gals that sort of are part of this world, really are fantastic and amazing to talk to. And everybody has a really cool story as a result of nobody really dreaming to be in here, how they get here. And it's one of the reasons I'm able to do this podcast and learn, I learn a ton. I find there's so much to know in this space, and it's so easy to gloss over details that are really important, how things work, and it's such a complex system that we've built. It's really quite magical. But it requires people to know and understand and continue to build, and that's why we're lucky to have you in this industry, and I'm lucky to be part of it. So anyway, this is probably a good time to end. But I'm really thankful that you agreed to sit down with me, and that chance meeting at TPM last year was really great, and maybe you'll decide it's worth your time to come back sometime.
No, for sure. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really, really enjoy it, Grant. And it's nice to not just talk about the big picture or the common statistics or whatever, but to get a little bit deeper and just to go back to what you were saying about the blue collar side of our business. This is something I'm really passionate about, because I was a warehouse guy for many years, and warehouses are so dependent on the operational. We call it they call it labor, and we do analysis on labor and the availability in the market, but it's people. At the end of the day, it's humans, and so the real competitive edge is, do you have a place for humans to work that enjoy their job? Do you provide a good environment for them where they want to come in and they're passionate and they care about it? And you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of people really do in our industry, especially in the maritime industry, they love this. Their heart is in it, and those are the things that really make a difference. When you have a workforce that's highly motivated, that likes what they do, that care, that want to support, that they see the big picture, they know that their customers are their lifeblood. That's a really special thing, and I think that's a key differentiator, and something every organization I've worked for in this industry has sort of been able to have that bond with the operational side of the people that actually make it happen. So shout out to those folks. Thanks for the time. Really enjoyed it, and we'll talk soon.
All right, excellent.
Thanks for listening to Third Wave Trade Talks. To get in touch and learn more about what we do, visit our website at 3rdwave.co. There you'll find more resources to enrich your knowledge of global trade. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.